To be honest, I was gonna have a broom in my hand when I started this, or one of our mops, and I decided to go against that because I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So time for number 2 for the cover page series videos that I am doing. This one will be going over the Diary of Koby-Meppo, which is of course, the second cover page series that they did. Pretty much depicts Koby and Meppo and their kind of exploits and training and stuff like that as Marine cadets. And this is one of the ones that was depicted in the anime, so I'll be using some of the pictures from that. I'll be also pointing into where it ties into some of the other stuff that we see in the anime, along with the fact that this is one of the ones that we do kind of get to see in the live action, which is kind of a fun thing to do. Buggy's we really didn't get to see in the live action because he didn't really go on that adventure. They kind of trapped him in chests instead of knocking his body really far away. They trapped him in the chests, and so everybody was able to escape. But the Diary of Koby-Meppo has 30 installments. It runs from chapter 83 to chapter 119, with a few other cover pages thrown in there, of course, for the rest of this, for other bits in there. And it is covered over 2 episodes, episodes 68 and 69. And this, just like the Buggy one, is kind of interspliced with seeing what the Straw Hats are up to at that point in time, just to kind of give you some context, I guess. So the short summary of this is essentially, Koby and Meppo are at the Marine base in Shellstown after Morgan has been defeated, and Koby has been accepted as one of the chore boys. Same thing with Meppo, more to have him learn his lesson more than anything, which is just kind of funny. Be interesting to see what those Marines at that base think of Meppo now. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see if that ever comes into play. We also get introduced to Garp and Bogart in this cover story. We also kind of find out vaguely what happens to Morgan. And then, of course, it ends with them training at Marine headquarters under Garp's supervision, however you want to put that. So, for the much more long way of doing this, going through each of them. So we, of course, have it that they have Koby and Meppo after the fact, which is the first one. And this just essentially shows with them at the... Koby has, he's been dreaming of his Marine hood and everything else like this since he was a little boy. And now he is a chore boy at the 153rd branch, which is the Shellstown branch. In the East Blue, where we see them interact with Morgan, of course. And by day, he's diligently scrubbing the floors, unlike his co-worker, who is Meppo, who is still very obnoxious at this point in time and just utterly helpless. So we see this, we see how Meppo was still very arrogant at that point in time. And then we have number 2, odd jobs. So this is just essentially Koby and Meppo being put on various other duties that need to be done around the base to kind of keep it going. Kind of, this is hazing on Meppo's part, as in he's kind of being hazed by the Marines, who he very much mistreated when he was the pampered, spoiled little brat that was Morgan's son. So we have that. They're doing laundry, they're doing a bunch of other stuff, so we get to see that one. And Meppo is just disgusted by all of this because his mind at that point in time is just menial labor is below me. Why do I even have to do all of this stuff? And Koby is, of course, being very diligent at it. And then we have an off-base break. So this is where we have Koby and Meppo end up going to be able to take lunch with Rika, who is, of course, the little girl that we are introduced to in Shellstown. Her mom owns the restaurant there. She's the one who makes the onigiri balls. The onigiri for Zoro and everything. So we have that. We see her there interacting with them, and her and Koby are getting along. And Meppo has made a voodoo doll of Luffy and is trying to get revenge on it by nailing a hammer through it. Not exactly sure where Meppo okay, generally the premise for voodoo dolls is that you're supposed to have some of like a piece of clothing of the person or a piece of their hair or something like that. I don't know what Koby-Meppo would have, but it's just his therapy. Although it would be hilarious if this how it lines up with like at one point in time where like Luffy's in a battle and he gets like kind of vaguely hurt. But I don't know. That would be kind of funny. It'd be like, oh, maybe that voodoo did work there. We see that later on with, Hawkins. Number 4 is study, study. So this is, Koby is, of course, very much spending his late nights studying as much as he can, probably about marine history and learning the marine handbook and all of that type of stuff. Along with the rest of the rest of the unit, including Koby-Meppo, are just all asleep. So he's just studying keeps studying and everything else like that. Then we have odd jobs for the Morgan arraignment ship. So this is Koby and Koby-Meppo get put onto the ship and getting things ready for when Morgan is going to be transferred over to higher up Marines for... My brain went to accommodation and I'm like, no, that's not right. When they transfer him over there to be punished for the way that he was acting. So we see them on the ship and they both see Morgan and they're both terrified. Koby because he hasn't really gotten any stronger, and then Koby-Meppo because he's just kind of always been terrified of his dad. To be fair, in the anime, Morgan at least back axes him, which is, I guess, funny and deserved in the time frame, but Koby-Meppo got better. And so we see that they're just like, oh god. They're like, oh god, that's not good. So they they're there for when he's going to get court-martialed. And then we have odd jobs on deck, which is just them having to go through and do a bunch of, polishing the weapons on the ship and the gun deck and everything else like that. And Koby-Meppo is actually kind of wondering if his father is going to be executed for his crimes. And I'm like, in the long run, no. In the short term of what could have happened, I doubt it. Probably the most they would have done is like thrown him and impel down. If that, depending on the circumstances, they probably would have just thrown Morgan and Impel down. Then we have odd jobs, what? And this is where we have it that Koby and Koby-Meppo end up seeing the other ship that is appearing, that is the other Navy ship that is coming to deal with the court-martial for Morgan. And they're just like, oh god. And then we have the ship of Marine Headquarters, Vice Admiral Garp. And then this is where we have it that Koby-Meppo spots it, Koby sees it, and then they all run over and they're all saluting. Like, okay, we gotta salute this guy. So this is our first introduction to Garp. Now, at the time, most readers who hadn't read either of the 2 prior versions of Romance Dawn, or at the very least the one where we see Garp depicted in Romance Dawn for the first time, which is, I think, Volume 2 of Romance Dawn. Or version 2 of Romance Dawn. You wouldn't know that this is supposed to be Luffy's grandfather, but if you've read that one, then you're like, okay, I get it. That's this character. Or you'd be like very likely to think that that's the character, because they don't reveal that at this point in time. They just reveal that he's supposed to be Vice Admiral Garp. So then we get into the delivery of Morgan. So this is where we have it that Garp is on their ship and they are handing over Morgan so that way he can be transported onto, Garp's ship to then be taken back to Marine Headquarters for his arraignment and then possibly thrown Impel down or whatever the case would be. To be fair, some of the higher-ups probably wouldn't like it the way that Morgan's acted, but they may also not care. Sengoku would care. I don't know about how Sakazuki would have handled this in the if it had happened later. I don't know how Sakazuki would have handled it. But this is where we're introduced to Garp, and we get to see his ship, which has like the big dog head on it, and Garp has his like dog head mask and everything, which is just funny. And Koby-Meppo tries to approach his shackled father, but he's held back by Koby, which is, I think, Koby-Meppo just kind of wanted to at least like say goodbye to his dad. However that would have gone, not well is the answer. So then we have Marine Headquarters. Vice Admiral lets down his guard. And this is where we have it that Morgan is suddenly able to break whatever chains he's in. Clearly they're not Sea Prism Stone, although he's not a Devil Fruit user, so they wouldn't have used Sea Prism on him anyway, probably. Breaks those, and then he suddenly slashes his axe across Garp's chest. And ends up, Garp falls to the ground. Koby and Koby-Meppo are screaming in terror. And Morgan has, attacked Garp. And then we have Garp's aide leaps into action. So this is the introduction of Bogard, who, fun fact, was not named in the manga for a long time during the cover page series. And even after, he ended up getting named in the anime. They named him Bogard after Humphrey Bogart. And then like Casablanca and stuff like that, which is just kind of funny, which I like. And like now we've seen more of what Bogard can do. We know he was at God Valley. We've seen him pop up again. He's Garp's right-hand man, all of that stuff. So we've seen a bit more of Bogard. And now we have the unbelievable hostage Eppo. So Morgan has managed to get onto one of the little dinghies, and he has taken Koby-Meppo as his hostage as they're sailing away. And we have Morgan's escape with the terrified Koby-Meppo in tow. Morgan makes his escape on a spare dinghy. So they're, sailing away, and, Koby-Meppo is hostage. Shows you exactly where Morgan, views his son, which is just sad. And we have prepare to fire, so we have that Bogard is having, cannon aimed at the dinghy to try to sink the dinghy, and Koby is just like, oh god, no, please don't let that happen, I don't want my friend to get hurt. Koby is just horrified by this, and like Koby-Meppo is like screaming for help. And then we have obstruction of bombardment. Koby has he's like summoned up all of his courage, and he's jumped in front of the cannon, and he is like blocking the cannon with his own body. He also has like 2 of the pistols in his hands that he's like grabbed off the other Marines, and he's firing every pistol he can find, desperately trying to stop them from blasting the ship because Koby-Meppo is on it. And what ends up happening is obstruction of bombardment, and Koby-Meppo, or not Koby-Meppo, Koby pleads for Koby-Meppo's life. And, they just end up getting sliced to bits by Bogart, which is just hilarious. And I don't like that they cut that out of the anime. And then it's obstruction of bombardment, obstruction. And it's, to everyone's shock, Garp just has suddenly revived, crushes the cannon, well, the remnants of the cannon, because I think Bogard kind of slices up the cannon in the process of slicing up the guns. And then it's like the cannon is now inoperable. There is an art oversight in this one because Garp's chest wound from Morgan is not there for this panel, and then it appears back up again later. And then we have Koby-Meppo's determination, and it's suddenly summoning his own courage for the first time. Koby-Meppo not only defies but outright disowns his father. And this is like where we have the panel where Koby-Meppo is like pointing down at Morgan, and it's just like, you are not my father anymore. I don't want to be like you. You're horrible, and you're not my dad anymore. You're not my real father. Yelling at him. And like in the drawing, we have Koby-Meppo's legs are like just visibly shaking from how terrified he is, which is fair. I don't blame Koby-Meppo for being terrified at this moment, but it does take a lot of courage to do that, to stand up to this person that has been this very looming figure in your life. And then there's another oversight in this one where Morgan's axe is drawn on his left hand instead of his right hand. So there's that. You're getting sloppy there, Oda. Then we have Vice Admiral Garp's negligence. So, flabbergasting all of the other Marines, probably except for Bogart, Garp admits that he'd fallen asleep on the job, and he hadn't even noticed that Morgans had attacked him, which is just funny. And I just find that hilarious. And this goes perfectly because we know that Garp, Luffy, and Ace all have, like, random narcolepsy. Because that's what happens when we first meet Ace in Alabasta as he falls asleep while he's eating. And then when Garp and Luffy are reunited at Water 7, in mid-lecture, both Garp and Luffy just fall asleep. Which is hilarious. It's like, did Roger do that too? Does Dragon have this weird process, this weird thing too, where somehow when every now and then in the middle of a meeting he just falls asleep and then like Ivankov pokes him and then he wakes up again? I don't know. I want to know if that's a thing. I want to know if Dragon has this narcoleptic trait. Hilarious, but it would be really funny to find out. So he's just like, yeah, I didn't even notice that. Sorry. Fell asleep. Didn't notice I got sliced. Okay, sure. Yeah, you're going to get stabbed in the stomach with an icicle in about 2.5 years. Pay attention to that, dude. Then we have Morgan alone. So Helmeppo has managed to jump off of the boat and is swimming back toward the Marine ship. And Morgan is just sailing off on his own. And this, in the anime, is the last time that we see Morgan. Because this is one of the ones that's depicted in the anime. This is the last time that we see Morgan in the anime. He does pop up again in the next cover page story with Django, but we don't see him again. Morgan and, like, Kuro are, like, two of the villains, and Arlong are, like, the 3 villains that we have gotten, like, no updates on. So now we have Helmeppo's return. So Helmeppo has managed to swing back to the Marine ship. He's pulled aboard by several of the recruits, including Koby, and he's just so worried, and he's just like, oh my god, Helmeppo, are you okay? And then we have Apology. And this is where Vice Admiral Garp, before Vice Admiral Garp, Koby and Helmeppo and the rest of the unit bow and beg forgiveness for all that has happened. And yeah. They're just like, we're sorry, sir. Please forgive us. We're sorry that we were inept in what just happened and we couldn't stop him. And we're sorry we got your suit ruined. And please have a donut. So now we have the we are worthless, where Koby and Helmeppo are just apologizing the hardest of all of them. Because they're the ones who caused so much of this trouble, or they view themselves as doing this. And so they think that they've been insubordinate and failing to recapture Morgan and everything. So they have all this, and I love it because it also just reminds me, Disney brain here, the scene in Hercules where they have Pain and Panic going, we are worms, worthless worms, to Hades, which just like is so funny. And then it's 5 seconds till Garp's speech. And then we pause on this moment as like Garp is like thinking and like approaches the two of them as they are kneeling on the ground and they're weeping. And then we have I shall take these two under my wing, which is Garp, much to the surprise of everybody except possibly Bogart. It's just like, yeah, these two, yeah, I like these two. They got gumption. They're coming with me. I'm gonna train them. I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what? And then it's just like, I'm going to take the two of you to Marine headquarters and you're going to become my new proteges. We're going to what? How? Huh? It's the exact answer there. So it's like this, oh my god, what? And then like Bogart's probably in the background like, oh my god, dude, really, why do you do this to me? You pick up these random kids and oh god, are you and Whitebeard gonna try to have a number? Never mind. Just like Bogart in the background, just like running through his head of all the other proteges like Garp has had, which is like, oh, that's Aokiji, and like, well, I know he's got that grandson. Bogart may have been one of the few Marines that knew that Dragon was Garp's son. Bogart may have been one of the few to know that. That would have been very interesting to find out if he ever did. He'd be like, hopefully this doesn't turn out like the way his own kid turned out. Oh, his son's a pirate. His own grandson's a pirate now. Just like Bogart in the background, just going like, this just makes more work for me. Which is true. And then it's Koby-Meppo to the Marine headquarters. So now we've jumped forward in time and they've made their way through the Grand Line, over Reverse Mountain, through the Grand Line, or over the Red Line, I should say, and to Marine headquarters, which is, really freaking far. And they made their way there. And then it's just odd jobs at the Marine headquarters. So essentially they're back to doing what they were doing at the other base, which is just funny. It's just really funny. And, it's like the exact same life, except it's still like scrubbing the floors and doing laundry and everything else like that, where they're superiors, which is now not just like a captain in the case of, the other higher, the ranked Marines or whatever, but now there's like rear admirals and vice admirals and possibly just admirals and then the fleet admiral just roaming around this building and stuff like that. Whatever the frick rank Bogart is, I don't remember what Bogart's rank was. I don't think we've ever been confirmed on what Bogart's rank is. Garp is of course vice admiral, but... And then we have special training during valuable sleeping time. So, at night, while the other recruits are sleeping, Koby and Helmeppo have been beginning their training proper. And they never trained this hard, and they're just like, oh god, we gotta keep training and everything else like that. So this is like them doing, like the pull-ups and sit-ups and running and all of this other stuff that they've been doing. And we have every day, special training. So this is just in the dead of night. Koby and Helmeppo are practicing their swordsmanship training, and they're beating each other bloody with Sini, which is like the wooden swords that they train with. And this kind of works because we know that Koby ends up picking up like Garp's fighting style of like using his fists, but Helmeppo does pick up his kukuri knives eventually, and he fights with his kukuri knives, which is nice. And then we have a small farewell. So we cut back to Shellstown, and we cut back to Rika and Rirukia, who is her mother, and they're being told by the other Marines that, by like Commander Ripper or whatever, that, I think that was it was like Ripper, but I don't remember, I think it was Commander Ripper, is being was telling Rika and her mother that, like, okay, so Helmeppo and Koby kind of got promoted and they've been moved to Marine headquarters. And Rika is just very upset about this. And she is just crying and just, like, so upset and everything like that. And is kind of throwing a tantrum, which is fair. Her two friends are gone, and she really liked Koby. And she's just like, it's the loss of her playmates. No, it's the loss of her friends. And I do kind of wonder if they ever see her again. I know that later on, I think Koby and Helmeppo are on the ship when Garp goes and talks to Dodon and Makino when he goes back to Fuchsia after the event of Marineford. I think that Koby and Helmeppo are with him when he does that. And maybe they convinced him to stop off at Shellstown so they could see Rika and stuff. But that's a possibility. I don't know. And then we have Laughing Garp and the Hard-Working Young Men. So this is the last one of the cover page series for this one. And it is Garp is just sitting and watching, eating his donuts, while Bogart just easily beats Koby and Helmeppo in 2-on-1 training match. But they have very much improved in how strong they've become in their training and their skills and stuff like that. And that's part of the point, is that you got to go through all of this training, all this pain to get to, particularly like in sports and stuff like that. You got to go through all this pain for music. You got to go through all of these hours of practicing, the same thing over and over again to get to the point where you can, be able to play these beautiful songs and stuff like that, and beautiful, this beautiful music and everything else like that. So it's the same type of thing. And we see that here. And like they are improving. So kind of the aftermath for how some of this lines up. We do have the Django's Dance Paradise, which is the next one I believe that I will be reviewing for this. And we do see that Morgan does continue on his little trip. He falls asleep in the dinghy as it's sailing by, as it's sailing and it's floating, and it's crosses paths with Django's boat that they have no idea about, which is just funny because they have a history together because of Kuro. And then we have Koby and Meppo do, of course, are training under Garp and Bogard at Marine headquarters. This is also where in the timeline it would fall for where we have the flashback that we get during Hachinosu, where we have Koby and Helmeppo along with Prince Groose and Kujaku and a bunch of the other younger Marines, probably Hibari is in there as well, the newer recruits that are in the class where Garp is teaching them the class about the old man and the baby and on the island and everything else like that. Because that's how Koby has like his his older, younger appearance during that time frame. So this is like where that is happening. And like that would tie into like all this other training. This also goes into where we have the bits where we have Koby doing the battleship bags, where he continuously trains with them even though it's causing so much pain and damage on his hands. And we see that during that flashback that, of course, we're getting during Hachinosu when they're trying to rescue Garp. And then, of course, in canon, the next time that we see them is in... Well, actually, so I do believe we see them in the cover page series 4, Django's Dance Paradise. So we have that. We do see them there with, like, Django and Full Body and stuff like that. We see them in the background as, they're training and everything else like that. But then the next canon appearance that they get is the post-Ennis Lobby arc, or the Return to Water 7 arc, depending on how you want to put it. Where we have Koby and Helmeppo, of course, accompany Garp and Bogart when they go to when they go to Water 7 to see Luffy. And of course, this in the time frame of the anime and in the manga is when we learn that Garp is Luffy's grandfather, where we learn about that family connection, and then also where we learn about Dragon and all this stuff. But first we have it that, Koby and Helmeppo kind of like try to jump Luffy and Zoro, but they get defeated very quickly. And then Kobe's like, wait, Luffy, it's me. And Helmeppo's like, please don't kill me, Zoro, I'm sorry. I won't steal your swords again. And like, Luffy recognizes Koby even though he's changed, and like neither of them recognize Helmeppo, which is just hilarious. And then of course we have it that, they sit and talk and everything. And, even going through all of that, we see them later on at Marineford, and, with Koby getting, observation and armament hockey later on. Same thing with Helmeppo, at the very least getting observation hockey, I think. I think he may have armament, I'm not sure. But like we see that, and then of course later on, much more recently, we have it that they were at Hachinosu, where they helped try to save Garp, where they had gone to, where Helmeppo and we know at some point that the two of them joined Sword. Koby and Helmeppo joined Sword and are part of that. So, we see all of that, very recently in the anime. We saw everything with that. We're going to see them again a little more soon in the anime, or have seen them by now, probably. With Vegapunk's message by the time this actually goes up. So we're getting a good chunk of that. So it's like we're staying with them. And I love that they do that. And I love that we keep getting like these little check-ins with like Koby and Helmeppo and everything else like that. And just how much stronger they've gotten as Marines, to the point where now they are able to not stand up to a Yonko, but at the very least cause damage to their crew, which is nice. As we saw in Hachinosu with them fighting the Blackbeard pirates. We also know that they have a long way to go. And Garp, of course, sees them, along with the rest of the members of Sword, as these future leaders of the Marines. They are the ones who are the future of the Marines. The way that he probably thought that Dragon was going to be the future of the Marines. Or the way that he had wanted, like, you know, Ace and Luffy to be the future of the Marines. That clearly did not happen. They very much went the other direction. And then now he has Koby and Helmeppo, and he very much sees in them this drive to make the Marines a better force for good. A much more, not pure, but actually pragmatic force for good in the world. Type of a thing. So we'll see how that ends up playing out in the end. Yes, there's the whole theory that, like, oh, Kobe's going to eventually end up being the fleet admiral because that was his dream. But maybe by the time the story ends and we get to, like, maybe the first prologue, maybe Kobe's up to, like, a vice admiral, and then maybe Helmeppo is, like, a little bit below him, and then maybe eventually we'll see, like, Koby as, like, an admiral, and then eventually maybe as, like, the fleet admiral. But, like, you know, we also got, like, Koby and Tashigi, or not Koby and Tashigi. We have, like, Smoker and Tashigi in there as well. So we'll see what ends up happening throughout the rest of the story. But I like how this, like, ties in a bunch of that stuff. Now, I do want to address that the 2 anime episodes that do adapt these do a little bit of a different thing. They kind of adjust things a little bit. They do show Koby and Helmeppo's friendship growing, but they also show them arguing a lot at the beginning of it. We also see them terrified of Garp multiple times, which is fair. I would be terrified of Garp as well. Oh yeah, I'd be terrified of Garp. So we get that there. We see them developing this friendship. We do see them angry at each other, but we see them getting better, and we see how strong that friendship has become between the 2 of them throughout the course of the manga and the anime and all of that stuff. And I love how they've done that. I love how they kind of pop up in some of the movies as well, because, like, they're in Strong World, and I think they're in Film Z, and they're in Film Red, and they're in Stampede. They're not in Film Gold, but they're just one of the ones that are not in Film Gold. There's not really a lot of Marines in Film Gold, but we see a couple of, they're in several of the other movies, which I like. It's just like, well, what are they up to during the movies? They're getting history lessons, or they're getting dragged off the island, one of the two. Or they're helpful in the case of Film Red, in that regard, which is just great. So that's what we have here. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!